ye wo UK die na se yenko eye ohene ho UK fo hene e de aba wetu dwa a wo kire mu won nkase mu se gold wa o mesese free eye ye nananom asase so ko ye no o san so e de bro mo biem na die enti na o de bro mo na bo o de bro mo ne kra ene sen enti se ben na eda ho we abaye news a nkofo mebre na obia ehye na adwene e wo saa asemu ho ebi kire se loan no mo tan edi gold yi bro Ghana for as loan no enye ne kwan no na enye Ghana for mo de bra santiman as loan enye ne kwan no wa be wia obia de o de bra na wo san so de man loan no mo ankasa wo gold ye very say gold house pa me kan say gold house na ohwe de waiter gold ni tie ho pa na omudi ekuro bia flag asiso check na ho odin ni saa no mane o ma na say nkofo no mani abre yi pa eni o mo so omudi bre Ghana back na good school isu uhwe school so a we ene ni o mo mewie wiaye efiri ye nananom asase so asisi ye kase o mo so omudi ya de bre back na ba omudi ban so a omudi ban so as a loan omudi bre loan na loan no omudi bre ne kura ene sen na yesomu a eyiyi ana yesomu a enyiyi we abaye kasa kese e da ho a Ghana ni di hye bia ebusa ho asem obi ebusa ho se ne nkofu asem o mo kan o me so mo kire sen pa so wa be wia me made na osan de bre mi loan de o mo dwene ho o mo nte ase obi adwene ho nte ase ene mo ma wia nso de ano den na loan o mo de bakra na o mo se yenye ne den o mo de ba me yesa etu o mo ka ana so mo de ba san dan o mani akọ ye be kwa akọhwe asem no mu nkyire mu ankasa na one woman bi eye video e de bre me time wa wontumi e kasa ya o mo kyese na no e patre kotia opem so no woman bi eye video e de bre me audio e de bre me time mo audio but woman we audio na be si asem wo kan ye emre bi so be kasa ono ko ye prophet asem wo kan ne abesi su pepepepepepe e die na woman no e kan ye woni video mo ye audio so mienu na bre me first one no de buy na ekosi ye no wasan so the second one na ba wasan mahunu say asem wo kan ye no me hwe say akwakobam yenkoti first audio de bre me no ye wi am the second no e be san kan
Eko na me hwe o program be about want me any otekoko so na me pacho who is chairman want me any otekoko so asante hene want me e person kire so o ni kingdom hwe aburochire ha Queen Elizabeth ne papa and I'm talking about century 17 18 na ahemfo a anase ohene a omusuro no eya sante hene na sase makan mesan kan biem monarchy na according to me maame no tete ho no asante sa abrofum ebo edwa ne bia obroni ne o translate asem no kire abrofo no te ase a asante ekosa adoa no de ka asem kire nana atwe no ho translate yi no nte ase ohini tumi sa no apagya ne nsa no ayese no waka ne se no aye ne nan sen na asantefo na boagi so ye because te ase abrofo ye jimi no gyina ho te ase because enye brofo and according to tete no na di etuo aduro enti won warriors na ehwe asante hene akomya no sika gwa kofi a won ye so mba befa won ntumi amfa no abrofo de etuo egu abibifo na asojafo no so a na won adi etuo aduro ni nti no won so bebia etuo no agu ho no a won ayi etuo na to akyene kuma pema na aborɔfo no so bibifoɔ nso wɔn ni etuo na mmom wɔn wɔ bow and arrow. Saa bow and arrow no wo obroni no wotu tuo no ɛbɔ obibini no. Na ɛbi sɛ wɔn di etu aduro nti etuo no nka wɔn. Na ɔtwe ne bow and arrow a wɔnim nea according to sources no wɔn de yɛ arrow na no dɛnkyɛm mmerɛboɔ ɛyɛ poison ɛte sɛ cyanide. Nti wɔn to arrow no gwan na ɛkɔwɔ obroni no bam ɔda hɔ ɛnkyɛn na ne body na yɛ gangrene. Hey, and because of this aborɔfo suro Ashanti Kingdom. Yeah, mo deɛ ɔte kɔkɔɔ so sɛ wɔn yɛ biribi na sɛ mo deɛ mo pass wobɛtumi atia ne nan so a ɔnka nkyerɛ Charles sɛ agye sɛ Buckingham Palace na ɔbɛda. Charles di mirika, odi mirika. And I'm telling you, me feel Ghana nti no, I don't believe in chieftaincy and I win, but I'm telling you about Otikokoso. It will be because any invite Asante hene na ye invite Granfo hene and ye invite Pepe for ye Uradi Yankupon. Ye bet me invite Asante hene cry. Ye invite South Africa. Or you know, was a time will be can be said Bomodian tears at TP ne asɛm a meka kyerɛ obi sɛ Zulu ahene no ɛyɛ second to asante na meka kyerɛ sɛ you people obi ka na also you don't know, just say you don't know who is Zulu. Now even monarchy ɛyɛ Ashanti Kingdom no Queen Elizabeth sɛ ɛyɛ aborɔfo a nka wɔmbɛka sɛ Ashanti Kingdom ɛna ɛba nsana Queen Elizabeth ne n'asefo n'aba. Enti no, who is wound to me? Chema wound to me. Ekum apem beba. Ye kum Ashanti mema no. Saa na etuo no wɔn kɔ yiyi firi wɔn body mu wɔn adi etuo ayi no wɔn kɔ yiyi firi wɔn body mu na Ashanti na Britain for English for wɔn Scottish for wɔn nyinaa ba they cannot defeat Ashanti. Now wo ntetia wenye sikenti na lawyer ampa waye n'anim te sɛ premature baby. Agwara ya wo no foforo bia no omo ani hete te sɛ toad no. Na wugina ho ka ahemfo asɛm no mu godi ma. Oh, why do you do that? Why do you have to say things like that? Damage control. And I'm off ton sassy. That's not the issue. That is not the issue. The issue is say Chema won to me akasem against the Otikokoso. Minima some chrome. But he have no right. Abruchi Queen Elizabeth. So or no or court, but yeah regime there. Now or no. Na we Charles dear my fan so ya akwara but onim amamere no and he will not play with amamere. Aye Queen Elizabeth, aye Buckingham Palace, he won't play with it. Now but now I damage control na power yet nim to say premature baby no they can Ashanti Kingdom no now as him for no more to turn cinema. Hey Ghana for tete honwa ho Lord I'm sorry or here to me declare a curfew. Nim na munim. Ayamba yɛde wo ti agye akyerɛma. Sia! Ɛnɛ wɔn ayɛ no anga polish no awurade nyankopɔn yɛbɛku adwa agu nkonnwa ho so wagimi a yɛbɛku adwa agu na yɛfrɛ wontumi a ɔso ɔyare na unsuro ha ummu adia na ne kakrawa hwɛ ɔte so obetumi afrɛ Charles sɛ ɔmmra Africa, let's say Ghana, and I say Kumasi. Charles will go. Me na me kyerɛ wo. Obetumi ato ne nsa afrɛ Charles. I say, well, me kingdom. Yɛhwehwɛ wo. Ɔmfa na yere na n'anim sɛ pɔnkɔ no kora nka ho. Yɛhwehwɛ wo. And they will make provisions. Obema one more time. Obema one da anase say obekɔ akɔhu ɔte kɔkɔɔ so. Because gua kofi the whole world ebi nni baabi a deɛ asantefoɔ no de ma yɛ asantefoɔ de ma queen no ɛyɛ fake one ɛna ɔde akɔsi palace hɔ na ɔde Bible ato so na wabie King James Bible ɛna ɛda saa sikagua fukuo no ba akonnwa no ankasa akɔmfo anɔkye ɛkɔmande baeɛ no deɛ wantumi amfa na meka ti asɛm yie paa because ɛyɛ history me maame nom na ɛmaa yɛn ɛna me nso mabɛhu kakra ɔkɔmfo anɔkye no ne din ankasa de ɔkɔmfoɔ anɔ na ɔyɛ miracle perform miracle na ofi awukugwa abiru ne akuapem that side no perform miracles no na ɔyɛ ade na say ɔkɔmfoɔ anɔ chiripɔnfoɔ no ɔmo ka sɛ hwɛ a ɔmo se kye nti ɔmo yɛ sɛ ɔkɔmfoɔ anɔ kye kyerɛ sɛ hwɛ ɔkɔmfoɔ anɔ hwɛ ɔkɔmfoɔ anɔ hwɛ nneɛma a ɔyɛ no nti anɔkye kyerɛ sɛ anɔ hwɛ ɛna akɔyɛ ne din ɔkɔmfoɔ anɔkye na wonim akuapemfoɔ no a wɔmu firi abiru ɛna kyerepɔn ɛna mɛntɛmɛntɛfoɔ ɛnyɛ kuapem no a wɔmu firi ɛkoropɔn no wɔn a ɛka kyerepɔn no wɔn na ɛka kye kyerɛ sɛ hwɛ nti anɔ tumi kɔm saa na biribi asi na dawuro akɔsɛn abɛ ɛntɛm mehu saa dawuro na ɛsɛn hɔ no abɛ na wu but dawuro no da ho ɛsɛn abɛ no nkɔn mu ɛwɔ awukugwa. And I'm telling you this because that time no na misa but and you know I've got already 6 years 7 years into school to me kɔhwɛ dawuro na ɛsɛn hɔ no ɛna ɔware ɔde ne nan tu ɔware no na edu baabi no ɛna ɔyeraeɛ you know and ne nyinaa ɛwɔ hɔ sɛ wɔn nsɛɛ no dia nti ɔyɛ saa akonnwa no ɛde baeɛ no na queen nom ɛpɛ sɛ wɔn fa saa akonnwa no because ɛyɛ gold solid gold and it was command from heaven. I don't know how but it was real and you be and it was Ashanti kingdom. Now who want to me Who are you? What to ye nipa ba akope? No family. No any sika. Oh, ready.
According to a woman is a more walking. Nessa Asante too powerful pa. She can't Asante and Nessa Ghana, Utin in Castle so walk dia. Now or the second old will be Abba. Time where a barbon so the good no air bray as a loan. Or the second comment being so by. You could see second one or sign Sunday at the Bremen. And then some more kind at the can second one. And Messia.
Ako. Nema written for ever for free. I Kumasi Asante Hene 150 years ago. Now Otumfo I can't almost say. You sure so I can't Charles. And I Charles and so dear name I can't no Asante Hene Mono. Omo return saa nneɛma no nti wode hwɛ saa ayɛ a mede abrɛ wo clip no ɔsɛ nyɛ Ghana government ɛna request yɛ sɛ yɛmfa Ghanafoɔ adeɛ ma na mmom Otumfoɔ ɛna ɔsɛ yɛmfa ne nananom no adeɛ mmerɛ wɔn mo. Meka ama no akɔsi sɛ ɛnyɛ aban no ɛna ɛwɔ power. Asantehene ɛwɔ power kyɛn aban no because Asantehene ɛyɛ nananom. Aban no deɛ weiba no ɔkɔ but Asantehene deɛ owu a akonnwa no wɔ Asante a ɛnkɔɔ north ɛnkɔɔ south ɛnkɔ kwawu ɛnkɔ akuapem nti deɛ na meka no ɛna ɛda hɔ no. Okay, God bless you. Bye.
Tiamie ni masem kwasna na we de mosomu a na enyo no nko na akasa Ghana fo mebiri na adi nkomo minim se wa hwɛ me so wote saa asemi se ye di ade ne bre as a loan no obebusa ho question se na loan sesen se wa be fa me made na ade bre na san de bre me loan ade pa ma ngofu o mo se Ghana fo ye yatabataba na sesen first news about bontin if BBC for de ne beto abontin wie no opanyini bi eye video de nkyiremu so by as to ono nti asie mu yenko tie BBC for de omdi nkan de ba abontin e for gold na ye return no mo iwi a de aka mesan de account.
Now, it's been more than a century since treasures were looted by British soldiers from Ghana. Many of them hold huge cultural and spiritual significance. Now, in a landmark agreement, the Victoria and Albert and British Museums in London are returning them on loan to the Ashanti King. Our culture editor Katie Razzle has this exclusive report.
Now they're going back to Ghana for the first time in 150 years, to Kumasi's Mencha Palace Museum in a landmark loan deal with the Victoria and Albert and the British Museum.
They enter the South Kensington Museum and they're put on display, and they're displayed both as a work of incredible West African goldsmithery, but also as a sort of, sign of British imperial and colonial power.
17 V&A items are returning, including a peace pipe used by Ashanti kings, the Asantehene, and heavy cast gold badges worn by courtiers tasked with cleansing the king's soul. The agreement is not with the Ghanaian government, but with Otumfo Osei Tutu II, the current Asantehene, who once worked for Brent Council, monarch for a people whose history is steeped in gold and wealth. The deal's chief negotiator is Ivor Ajimandia.
There's so much interest in these items. These were objects that were created by the royal artisans for all sorts of ceremonial reasons.
Is the fact that you're taking them on loan a problem?
It's not really a problem. At least these objects will be home.
The British Museum is also loaning 15 gold items, including a sword of state looted by British troops during the Anglo-Ashanti War of 1895-6. British law bans some national institutions, including the British Museum and the V&A, from permanently returning objects.
In giving a piece back, you're also giving back a missing piece of history.
Nana Ofriata Ayim is a special advisor to Ghana's culture minister. She welcomes the loan deals with the Ashanti King. The Ghanaian government could not have agreed to the terms.
The metaphor is, someone comes into your home and steals something from your house, keeps it in their house, and then, X amount of years later comes and says, I'm going to lend you your thing back. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And so in that way, I think it's going to be deeply problematic for a lot of people. But because I've been working, with it, I know the kind of politics that surrounds it and also the kind of attachment to the idea of empire.
Those objects with origins in war, in looting, in military campaigns, we have a responsibility to the country's origins to think about how we can share those more fairly today. And it doesn't seem to me that all of our museums will fall down if we build up these kind of partnerships and exchanges.
Have you felt ashamed that these items are here?
I don't feel ashamed they're here. I feel they're part of a history of British-Ghanaian interaction, some of which is around war, some of which is around slavery, some of which is an incredible creative Ghanaian diaspora in the UK today.
The V&A insists this is not restitution by the back door. A loan is not a model the Nigerians would accept for the return of the Benin bronzes, nor the Greeks over the Parthenon sculptures. But with British law as it stands, for the Asantehene, this deal is the best way to bring the gold home for now. Katie Razzle, BBC News.
Nana Ofriata Ayim is a special advisor to Ghana's Minister of Culture. You saw her in that report there. Well, I also spoke to her and asked her about the significance of the return of these artefacts.
It's a first step, I'd say. The law here in the UK prohibits items from going back permanently, but as we know, the law has been changed before for the Holocaust items. And so I think it's a step in the right direction. Obviously, a lot of people are not going to be happy with the idea of a loan going back to a country that really should have ownership of its own items, but it's a first step.
This wasn't an agreement with the country, was it, with the government? This is with the Asante King. Just explain why and what's the significance of that?
I think a proposal was made to the Ghanaian government, but it was a little bit problematic because the country can't really accept a loan back or can't be seen to accept a loan back, whereas with the kingdom, I think it was a simpler process. The agreement came from, one agreement came from the V&A, went to the Attorney General's office and it was rejected because there were so many stipulations on how the items should be received back, for example, whereas I think, Ghana has enough sovereignty to know how to look after its own items.
And these are Asante treasures, aren't they? Tell us a bit more about them.
So there's various items. There's a soul disc, for example, which the Asantehene would have worn as a protector of his soul. There's various headpieces, there's a gold pipe, and a lot of these items are imbued with spiritual significance. And so they're not just, as Western museums might describe them, objects, but they are sometimes even, you might call them subjects, because they are imbued with immanence, with spiritual significance.
Is there a negotiation that could be reached here, a compromise, do you think, whereby the government would accept anything other than the full return of these items?
I mean, I know that in the language of, for example, the V&A, they were calling a renewable cultural partnership. I think, like I said, I think this is a first step, and I think what would have to happen is some kind of agreement or detente that goes from government to government. For now, it's the museums that have decided to return the items without the involvement of the UK government. So I think once the UK government gets involved, there's definitely a way forward.
What do these items mean? How important is it that they are returned, even if not permanently?
I mean, I think, for me, the whole discourse is almost much bigger than just about the return of the objects. We all know the aftermath and the resonance of colonial trauma, and I think lots of things were taken, relatives, people, items, but also the idea of our own cultural sovereignty, our cultural value, and so I think it's almost like a metaphor of this bigger fragmentation, this bigger separation of self, these items coming back, and so it's like I keep saying, a first step towards healing and reparation, I think, on both sides.
Let's gold ni de eba. Na emu no eyen hihye wo ho e na omo so de atodwa no. na nipa ɔde ɛyɛ video yi ɛba abɔnten na ɔno aso tena ase yɛ ho audio san ka ho no ɔbɔ video na no a react ɔbɔ video na no a react em so wɔ UK ho bia yenko tie nsɛm wɔ ka yɛ bra send video no ɛde brɛ me.
Hello guys, this is Daddy. Just decided to record this video to you because what I'm hearing is shocking, and I want you to listen to it. Today is 25th of January 2024. Time of recording is 9 a.m. BBC News in UK. Just listen carefully. And there are items that has been stolen, gold items that has been stolen from Ghana by the British over 150 years among some of the wars that they had with the Asante Kingdom. They have agreed to return some of them to Ghana, the Asante Kingdom, as a loan. And the Asante Hini Osetutu II has agreed to that terms for now. But the Ghanaian government disagrees to the terms of the loan terms. But for me, I'm a bit shocked because if you stole my item and you're returning it to me, you can't return it back as a loan. Some of the items that they stole, according to the British reporter, the government has permanently banned some of them returning to Ghana because it will collapse the British museums. Now, that's not our fault. You can't come to my house and steal my item and then display them in your museum and pretend that you never stole them. You just came and picked them because we didn't know how to use them. That is a bit shocking. So just listen to this news and then make your and think about it.
Be sure to get the latest on this situation. Now though, it's been more than a century since treasures were looted by British soldiers from Ghana. Many of them hold huge cultural and spiritual significance. Now, in a landmark agreement, the Victoria and Albert and British Museums in London are returning them on loan to the Ashanti King. Our culture editor Katie Razzle has this exclusive report.
There is anger. People look at it in colonial terms. Looting of items, precious items belonging to people, are things that they don't easily forget.
Gold from the royal court of the Ashanti Kingdom, which was once one of Africa's most powerful states. These objects and many more were looted by British troops in the Ashanti capital Kumasi in 1874 during the Third Anglo-Ashanti War. Sold at auction then, now they're going back to Ghana for the first time in 150 years, to Kumasi's Mencha Palace Museum in a landmark loan deal with the Victoria and Albert and the British Museum.
They enter the South Kensington Museum and they're put on display, and they're displayed both as a work of incredible West African goldsmiths, but also as a sort of, sign of British imperial and colonial power.
17 V&A items are returning, including a peace pipe used by Ashanti kings, the Asante Hini, and heavy cast gold badges worn by courtiers tasked with cleansing the king's soul. The agreement is not with the Ghanaian government, but with Otumfo Osetutu II, the current Asante Hini, who once worked for Brent Council, monarch for a people whose history is steeped in gold and wealth. The deal's chief negotiator is Ivor Ajimandia.
There's so much interest in these items. These were objects that were created by the royal artisans for all sorts of ceremonial reasons.
Is the fact that you're taking them on loan a problem?
It's not really a problem. At least these objects would be hope.
The British Museum is also loaning 15 gold items, including a sword of state looted by British troops during the Anglo-Ashanti War of 1895-6. British law bans some national institutions, including the British Museum and the V&A, from permanently returning objects.
In giving a piece back, you're also giving back a missing piece of history.
Nana Ofriata Ayim is a special advisor to Ghana's culture minister. She welcomes the loan deals with the Ashanti King. The Ghanaian government could not have agreed to the terms.
the metaphor is, someone comes into your home and steals something from your house, keeps it in their house, and then, X amount of years later comes and says, I'm going to lend you your thing back. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And so in that way, I think it's going to be deeply problematic for a lot of people. But because I've been working, with it, I know the kind of politics that surrounds it and also the kind of attachment to the idea of empire.
Those objects with origins in war, in looting, in military campaigns, we have a responsibility for the country's origins to think about how we can share those more fairly today. And it doesn't seem to me that all of our museums will fall down if we build up these kind of partnerships and exchanges.
Have you felt ashamed that these items are here?
I don't feel ashamed they're here. I feel they're part of a history of British-Ghanaian interaction, some of which is around war, some of which is around slavery, some of which is an incredible creative Ghanaian diaspora in the UK today.
The V&A insists this is not restitution by the back door. Alone is not a model the Nigerians would accept for the return of the Benin bronzes, nor the Greeks over the Parthenon sculptures. But with British law as it stands, for the Asantehene, this deal is the best way to bring the gold home for now. Katie Razzle, BBC News.
And I'll be talking to Nana Ofriata, who you saw in that report in just a few minutes' time to get more reaction to that story. Now, though, let's go back to the situation in Gaza.
Now, you saw the castle in this recording. The castle was built by the British as a compensation to the Asante Kingdom because they burnt their palace, the village, and everything in it. Well, they stole some of the libraries, the books that they needed, and burned the rest that they don't need. So they built this palace as a compensation. But in that
same say and when the two was so antiasia say go die near the abivia was answer to the my loan say question or obusa until the whole story na say obusa question wo so what you say na want you say ade dia na wa be fa na san de my loan antiasia omu anything obetimi de so wadwen kire e de aba na eye joyful adi hu nkomo ana one lady bi so e wa abrochire on so adi e hu nkomo saa yeni kan ko tie joyful nsem wo mo kaaye efa ayi gold yi hu nkofo mo be kire o madwene efa ho no onso fo adwen kire bra ade ne ye die owu no be fa ayi e na opem so e na o makasa no mo de ba o mo se ye loan me ntiasie yi obetumi do comment nso e de aba yenko tie joyful nsem mo to biamras.
Yes, so it's good to see you and a happy new year.
Good to see you. Happy New Year to you too.
So how long did the negotiation last?
It took 9 months from May of last year to recently 2 weeks ago or so.
So now the talk is over. When are we likely to see these artifacts back in the country?
It should be sometime in April, between April and May.
All right. So how do you react to a section of the public who feel the UK should rather return the stolen items in their custody rather than what we are hearing that you are loaning it for us for 3 years? This belongs to the Asante Kingdom, if you like.
Yes, I think it's a legitimate thing for people to ask. These were looted items, 1874, 150 years old items. So there is a form of a legitimacy when people question the basis of these objects coming home and coming home as loaned items. So it's legitimate, but then we've been talking about these issues of the objects for over 50 years, half a century, made requests over the years, negotiated at some point, and we're still where we were until recently that we reached this agreement. So those have been the issues. We have always had the historical antecedents on our side, but then there is the 1983 laws of antiquity in the UK by the House of Commons, sanctioned by the House of Lords, that make it very difficult for objects to be permanently taken back to the countries of their origin. And this had always been the constraining factor that sort of stood between our position and the British government. And it's not just us, but all the former colonies and all the geographic areas that have objects and other art instruments with the British Museum.
So therefore, after 3 years, it will be taken back to the United Kingdom?
The agreement is 3 years, renewable by another 3 years. But even after the maximum of 6 years, you can still negotiate for extension. So it's not just 3 years, renewable by another 3 years. There can still be negotiation for extension beyond the 6 years.
But it's interesting. I mean, look at this scenario. You stole something from me. I managed to identify my item with you. I'm taking it back. You're telling me that I'm giving it to you. You give me back after so and so years.
Yeah, it's been the case, and it's not just about this particular case. That is why the UNESCO conventions came about in 1970, and there's been subsequent amendments to these UN conventions that over the years looked at these issues that we are battling with. Objects taken from countries during colonial rule, objects taken from countries in the course of wars, and many others. So it goes beyond a specific case, and it's more international in terms of negotiations, in terms of settlement of objects, or what's become popular as the restitution or the ascension of objects.
Are we able to put value on the items?
There has been value on the items, but it's very difficult to talk about these because it depends on who the valuer is and how the valuation is done. Some will look at the historical antecedent of it, going back to 115 years, and others will not. They will look at other aspects of the objects. So it's different. The valuation could be different, and it's not by using the particular formula.
And please correct me if I'm wrong, but these were put in a British museum. I don't know whether people paid money to as visitors to this museum to have a look at it. If they are returning, would that come with some kind of monetary compensation as well?
The thing about the British Museum is you enter free.
Okay.
You don't pay any money when you go to the British Museum.
Okay.
It's a business strategy they adopted. And why people are sometimes very worried about this policy is there are millions of objects in this museum from all over the world. Many of these objects in the museum haven't been exhibited for decades. In our case, even for over a century. And the question is, if you are not exhibiting them, they are not part of your permanent collection, your permanent display. It means that the value you attach to these objects are not very high. So why don't you give these objects back to the owners who place a bigger value on the objects? And that hasn't also happened for many years. So it's very difficult to understand. And the one reason why some feel that they want to have possession has to do mainly with the imperial history of England and the UK as a former global power. The ascension of these objects, for some, will deprive them of that imperial feeling of the past. And so they will prefer to, at least the mentality of empire will stick with them. And that is how some have argued or seen the situation. Otherwise, you are not making money out of this.
Right.
You have them in storage, you preserving them using very high-level conservation methods, which means that you are investing in these objects, putting in lots of money.
My final question.
But at the same time, you are not making much out of it.
Great. My final question before I let you go. How excited is the Otumfuo about this, and will there be a special program to welcome the artifacts back?
I think they will be, when they do get in, they will come in a particular style. The directors of the British Museum, the Victoria and Albert, and some other UK museum directors plan visiting Kumasi for the first time officially between April and May. And this is not just about the objects, but a bigger framework for cultural cooperation between Menchia and these.
And I guess it is coinciding with Otumfuo's 25th anniversary on the throne.
It's coinciding with that. It's coinciding with the 150th anniversary. It's also coinciding with the centenary of Prempeh's return from exile.
All right. Mr. Ajimendua, if I'm allowed to call Professor Ajimendua, thank you very much for your time this afternoon on the course.
And for your interest in these issues as well.
Right.
Thank you.
All right.
According to Joy, one day, Ubia Umum, the first time you'll be a cancer, and I did you be dear. No one bet you out there, Breno. Now, Sunday, brain loan, dear. I mean, and toss or one Bianti, I say, anyway. Some metia, I'll be ramming them from my dear. What time my dear will coy? What's what they bring back? Now, dear Bremen, Obesandia, be a Bremen loan. I don't know, minimum what being chill too much wardrobe home. Lady be at the home como, and so they also have been chill to ja actually say, San Semnan of one can and turn us or you know who I want to see. And you know one I can, and more from the Brina, your home videos, a di home como say, a dear ya Santa my dear. Now walk off. Now for we no sans with the como mulu dear, Ubia so you know who I want to see. Young court na young could tea lady no soon someone. Also kind more so tenacity and would disarm community into
Ghana is the owner of these artifacts. You cannot loan to the owner what you stole. And these laws that bar British museums and the Victoria and Albert Museum from doing the right thing, it just tells you that the laws in this country are here to serve only one demographic, okay?
The Ashanti Empire had initially invaded a neighboring British colony. Under the law as it stood at the time, under international law as it stood at the time, spoil of war was a perfectly legitimate process. For centuries before that, right back to classical times, the right to take the property of a defeated enemy was regarded as one of the basic principles of international warfare.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm well. Now tell me, so the idea, a 3-year loan of these Ghanaian royal treasures, is this a model, a useful model for future deals to you?
Most definitely not. This isn't progressive. It's absolutely regressive. Look, it also demonstrates the height of colonial mentality that the British government in 2024, we have laws in place that allows the British government to bar these museums from giving back goods and artifacts that were stolen. Ghana is the owner of these artifacts. You cannot loan to the owner what you stole. And these laws that bar British museums and the Victoria and Albert Museum from doing the right thing, it just tells you that the laws in this country are here to serve only one demographic, okay? I mean, just think this through. The purpose of the law when it comes to theft is to punish the perpetrator and put the victim in the position they would have been in had their goods not been stolen. But these laws are doing the very opposite. It is what I call the idiocity of white supremacy. It is colonial mentality at the highest level.
Okay, let me just put this to you then. I can hear the passion in your voice. You obviously feel this very, very deeply. What about the idea of a practical compromise here that actually serves everyone's interests? We're talking about a deal. You know, of course, don't you, Shola, that under British law, it's not possible to hand these artifacts over permanently, to leave the country permanently. So a loan would allow these artifacts to appear back in your country where they originated and stay there for years, as well as, I don't know, smoothing over a problem and paving the way to better relations in the future.
What utter nonsense. And I say that with every respect. I think, John, you're trying to play devil's advocate here. So this is why I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, all right? And I'm British Nigerian, not British Ghanaian. But on behalf of my Ghanaian brothers and sisters, absolute nonsense. Compromise in the best interest of whom exactly? This is solely in the best interest of Britain, not in the best interest of Ghana. How, you know what? If somebody wants to tell us that this would be a compromise, then let's do this. Why don't we take the Britain's crown jewels, take it to Ghana? We simply take it. It's not even a loan. And then as and when we choose to, in the best interest of everyone, we will loan it to you for 3 years and get it back. How about that? How is that a compromise? And when you say that the laws in this country make it impossible, again, this is utter nonsense. Laws can be changed. The laws were put in place to maintain that idiocity of white supremacy because of that colonial mentality. The laws should be changed and the artifacts should be returned to their origin, their owners. Because, you know, I've heard some people who are clearly intellectually challenged, who come up with the premise of, Well, if we give it back to the owners, well, quite frankly, it means that these artifacts will lose value and they won't be able to take care of them, which again is another utterly nonsensical statement to make. If Africans, Asians had not created these priceless artifacts, put value on them, and preserved them, Britain would not have found them to steal them in the first place. So who is best placed to protect these artifacts and the true meaning of these artifacts? It most definitely is not the thief, i.e. Britain, it's the owner, Ghana.
Right. I mean, you couldn't be clearer in what you're saying. And yeah, I mean, I'll accept and admit that I am playing devil's advocate to an extent here, because that's partly what I do. But so let me just conjure a vision for you. I suspect I know your reaction, Ekuonaba, but let me conjure a vision of museums sharing and displaying great artifacts, historic artifacts, beautiful artifacts, priceless artifacts from each other's countries in each other's countries. They're therefore shared for the people of the world. You can argue art, you can argue is a thing which does not know borders. So if I put that emollient idea to you, Ekuonaba, are you just going to shoot me down?
No, I'm not going to shoot you down, because the premise here is that any sharing of art cannot be on the premise of theft. This is the point. Ownership is key and vital. So yes, if we're coming from the place of an equal, footing, where these artifacts are acknowledged by the people who sold them, that they're owned by somebody else, and that the origin is restored, then of course, I mean, it would be like a beautiful, lovely library in which we can share books from time to time for a period of time, and people in Greece can see something lovely from another part of the world. People in Brazil can see something lovely from another part of the world. That's fine, as long as it is not the thief, acting like they're the owner. In 2024, we cannot have the British government acting as though, well, because we stole this, well, technically, we colonized the country. You were thieves. You stole, you pillaged. And in 2024, it is time for reconciliation. It is time for a real apology that comes with justice. And that reconciliatory justice means returning back what Britain stole, including reparations. Look, John, I know, when you borrow something, okay, there's usually interest added on it, okay? So Britain not only owes Ghana, Nigeria, India, and many other countries their natural artifacts. Yeah. They should pay for having taken these for hundreds of years.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing your thoughts and your passion, Ekuonaba Moshogbamami. I'll put some of those questions now to a very, very senior lawyer, who is Lord Jonathan Sumption, a former Supreme Court Justice. Hello to you, Lord Sumption.
Hello.
So you heard that. You heard the argument. It couldn't have been clearer, could it? I mean,
it's very clear. I'm afraid it is complete nonsense.
Why is it complete nonsense?
It's complete nonsense for this reason. These artifacts were taken in the course of the Third Ashanti War in 1874. They were taken as a result of a war in which the Ashanti Empire had initially invaded a neighboring British colony. Under the law as it stood at the time, under international law as it stood at the time, spoil of war was a perfectly legitimate process. For centuries before that, right back to classical times, the right to take the property of a defeated enemy was regarded as one of the basic principles of international warfare. Now, that remained the case until in 1899, the Hague Convention, an international treaty governing the practice of war, changed the rules and made it contrary to international law to take enemy property regardless of the outcome. Yeah. So the suggestion that these items were stolen is complete nonsense, with great respect to the lady's passion, which I quite understand, but it's not true.
Okay, then well, let me just put it to you then. You're using and citing the law from a century and a half ago. Now it's 2023, and we take a dim view of looting treasures from other people and other countries. And these treasures clearly have their roots and their ownership in the history of Asante, the Asante Kingdom. They are said, according to that culture, to hold the souls of dead Asante royalty. They're more than just valuable baubles. They're part of the life and history of that country, the living history of that country. And to say that they belong to us now because they came to us via laws that existed a century and a half ago sounds a little bit tin-eared, I suggest.
Well, you may think so, but I'm afraid I don't agree with that. the principle that artifacts should return to the place of origin unless they were acquired in accordance with modern moral and legal principles, which only come into existence decades or centuries later, is absolutely pernicious. We have to accept the fact that in the past, people acted in accordance with values and laws very different from our own. Trying to undo everything that happened in the past simply because it wouldn't happen now is bound to be an extremely destructive process. And one of the main victims of that will be the great museums of Europe and North America. They are wonderful instruments of public education. They are monuments to the most beautiful creations of the human spirit. The British Museum, which is probably preeminent among them on a global basis, is a universal museum which is instructive precisely because it covers the whole range of artifacts from ancient and modern civilizations. Now, they are also visited by far more people there than they are ever likely to be visited by local museums simply exhibiting the treasures of a local tradition, such as the one in Kumasi, where these artifacts are apparently going to be exhibited.
Yes. Oh, you'll know that Tristan Hunt, at the V&A, argues that items that were looted, plundered, and taken during war, that places something of a moral obligation on those who own them now to show consideration to the former host country. Clearly, you don't accept that. Let me ask you.
I think it's arguable that there's a moral obligation,
right?
But it's not an argument that I accept, because leaving the law aside at the moment, morally, artifacts like these belong to all humanity and not simply to the particular section of humanity that happens to live in the Ashanti province of Ghana.
Okay. Now, what about the idea of this loan deal? Is there room for a meeting of minds on that, Lord Sumption?
I don't have a particular problem about this particular loan deal. I think that 3 years with an option to extend it for another 3 years is too long, but that's essentially a matter for the trustees of these two museums. What I do object to is the principle that we somehow have to return these items to their place of origin because they were taken in circumstances where they wouldn't be taken today, because I think that we have to accept the legacy of the past.
All right, Lord Sumption and Shola Moshogbamami, thank you for those polar opposite perspectives. Have to leave it there.
Abusha betimi wa dwenkyerɛ aba. Videos na mabo ache nyina dɔɔso yi pa. Comment section obetimi leave comment ho. Obetimi subscribe to my channel for more videos. Ana afin so emi adoma no so me ba life for wetimi nyame. Ne mum de tie ni. Asɛm wo mo kan mi mum de ntomasum. Se wa be wia me ma de na de brɛ me a wo san de ma me loan. Ebia me na mente brofo ana mente ase yi. Ebia me na me nya idea ni nyina yi. Wo so betimi de wo so wadwen kyerɛ de aba Ghana fo me bi na kyerɛ wo madwene. Wo betimi de afa your WhatsApp number so. Wo betimi de afa your inbox. Wo betimi so aye audio de aba aka asɛm we bi e bɛbɔ amankofo nyina ati. Wo bɛ se ye interview wo sa asɛm we hu so a ma yensan ka ho ye bɛ ye interview wo sa asɛm we ya ho. Na ebusa de wadwen kyerɛ videos amabo nyina yi. Emu bia pese me ho interview bia no de ma me hu na kona video me so ye me hu interview na emom no eya na at times me per video a live video me dafa na wo dafa na de din komo kwasem a be kan ye no korenti ne kwa so usuru wo wanim tetese kim na se asem aka no nturo bi hye baabi no me din de Ekuonaba wadwen kyerɛ wo videos wi hu nyina ene sen ma fe mu too much na me hyira mu nyina den a ye be san so ahyia bi nyame enka mo ho muni ho a Ekuonaba mini ho Ekuonaba wa be obi amechia ene abusua all over the world nyina mu nyina me do mu nyina mu tuma nya me hyira mo ewo maho den na mo adaje a mo sei ewo Ekuonaba me page yi ho me din de Ekuonaba nya me hyira pa
me didi papa bobo ase aha ya Ekuonaba television mesre mo se mo like mo be share na mo mia adom so maye se na be Ekuonaba transfer oba life na mo hu
aha Ekuonaba television ubetima visit your website www.ekuonabatv.com. all the social media handles ni nyina Ekuonaba TV wo video bi interesting apese di ho nkomo a number na gu screen so no ubetimi dia faso WhatsApp number ni aka ho asem opese ye wo interview so a number na na wo so no free ne fa topic na apese discuss no enso fa kan ho be ye wo interview kama ne mo kwa kai so be subscribe to channel no mi adoma no so for notification